Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling something, well, it's dense, but really practical for a lot of you out there. The nuts and bolts of managing federal workers' compensation cases.
That's right. We're taking a deep dive into a specific document, a standard operating procedure, or SOP. It's designed for handling cases under the Department of Labor's Office of Workers' Compensation Programs, OWCP.
Okay, so this SOP, it lays out the entire process, doesn't it? Like from the moment someone reports an injury.
Yeah, end to end. Filing the claim, managing the case over time, all the documentation needed, getting reimbursed for things like travel.
And making sure everyone's, following the rules, the compliance stuff.
Exactly. And our mission here is to kind of cut through that density. We want to pull out the essentials, the key steps, the forms you absolutely need to know, and those deadlines you just can't miss.
Think of this as your essential guide, maybe a shortcut, to understanding how these federal workers' comp cases are supposed to work, whether you're an employee trying to figure out your own claim, or maybe you manage these cases for your agency.
This is the information you need. We want to make sure you understand how to file correctly, why keeping track of documents is so important, and how, good case management really makes a difference.
Okay, let's get into it then. Where does it all begin? An injury happens at work. What's step one?
It starts with the injured federal employee initiating the claim, and the SOP is pretty clear. The main way, the most efficient way, is through ECOMP.
ECOMP, the Employees Compensation Operations and Management Portal, online.
Right. So step one is actually just getting registered on ECOMP, verifying who you are. Now, not every single agency part might be using it fully, but the SOP pushes it as the preferred method. Paper forms are really just a backup, if ECOMP is genuinely not an option.
Okay. And sometimes, even before the actual workers' comp form, there's another report involved, like an incident report.
Yes, exactly, the OSHA Form 301. Depending on your agency's specific rules, ECOMP might actually prompt you to fill that out first. It's more of a safety document describing what happened, and it often comes before the official FECA claim form.
Got it. OSHA 301 first, maybe. Then the core workers' comp forms, the SOP flags, two main ones, right? These are fundamental. You've got Form CA1, that's for a traumatic injury.
Traumatic meaning. Sudden.
Yeah, something specific usually happens pretty suddenly, all within one work shift, like a fall, or you strain your back lifting something heavy, or maybe you get hit by an object, that kind of thing.
And the SOP really stresses the deadline for this one, especially when it comes to continuation of pay or COP.
This is absolutely critical. If you take away one thing from the start, remember this. The CA1 must be filed within 30 days of the injury. If you miss that 30-day window,
You lose out on COP.
you lose your eligibility for continuation of pay. Gone.
And COP is, what, 45 days of regular pay instead of using your sick leave?
Exactly. It's a benefit only for those CA1 traumatic injury claims.
Yeah.
It gives you up to 45 calendar days of your regular salary while you're out initially. So hitting that 30-day filing deadline for the CA1 is just essential to keep that option open.
Wow, okay. 30 days. That's a tight window right at the beginning. What's the other main form, then?
That's Form CA2. This one is for occupational disease.
Okay, so not sudden, more like over time.
Right. Conditions that develop gradually because of your work, repeated stress, like carpal tunnel from typing maybe, or back problems from years of bending and lifting, or even hearing loss from long-term noise exposure.
So CA1 sudden, CA2 gradual. What's different about filing the CA2?
Well, for a CA2, you really need to provide a detailed history. Explain the exposure or the work activities that you believe led to the condition over that period. Well, it doesn't have that same strict 30-day deadline tied to COP like the CA1 does.
Filing it quickly is still better, I assume.
Oh, definitely. Prompt filing is always good. And for both forms, whether you're doing it in ECOMP or, on paper, you need to be thorough, accurate descriptions, fill everything out. ECOMP is nice because it actually lets you save a draft as you go.
Okay, form filled out. What about attaching stuff like evidence? Does the SOP say anything about doing that right away?
Yes, it does. You don't have to wait. ECOMP lets you upload initial supporting documents right when you file the claim.
Like what? Accident reports?
Yeah, accident reports, maybe statements from witnesses, photos of where it happened, even the report from your very first doctor's visit. The SOP points out that putting these things in up front can genuinely help speed up OWCP's initial review.
Makes sense. Give them the whole picture from the start. So the employee hits submit in ECOMP. Does it go straight to OWCP then?
No, actually. ECOMP routes it internally first. It goes to the employee's direct supervisor.
Okay, what does the supervisor do?
They add their input, confirm the employee's work status, add any notes they have about the incident, and importantly, They have the option to controvert the claim.
Controvert, meaning challenge it.
Essentially, yeah. Yeah. If they have specific documented reasons to question whether the injury actually happened as described, or if it's work-related, they can flag that. From the supervisor, it then goes to the agency's compensation specialist. They call them the agency reviewer.
So, like, the agency's expert on this stuff.
Right. They do a final check before it's officially transmitted to OWCP.
So there are internal checks before OWCP even sees it?
Yes, those steps are built in. Once the agency does successfully submit it, OWCP assigns that really important 9-digit case number. That number is your unique ID for everything related to this specific injury from then on.
How does the employee find out what their case number is?
OWCP sends out an initial notification letter. That letter has the case number. It also gives instructions on how to register for the Claimant Query System, CQS, which you access through something called OWCP Connect.
CQS, Claimant Query System, what's that for?
It's actually a really useful online tool. It lets you, the injured worker, check the status of your claim, see if decisions have been made, check if payments have been issued. It gives you some visibility.
Okay, CQS sounds helpful. Let's circle back to that continuation of pay COP. We hit the 30-day CA1 deadline. What else is key about COP?
Okay, remember, only for traumatic injuries, the CA1s. It gives you up to 45 calendar days of regular pay, so you're not using your own leave balances. And the clock on those 45 days, it starts the day or the shift after the date of injury, but only once you actually start losing time from work because of the injury.
45 calendar days. Starts the day after time is lost, only for CA1s. Got it.
Exactly. And those 45 days, they can be intermittent. So say you're out for a week, go back light duty for a bit, then have to go off work again for the same injury within that initial 45-day period. Those later days still count towards that 45-day total.
Okay. So it's not necessarily 45 consecutive days off.
Not necessarily. It's 45 calendar days of eligibility for pay continuation when disabled. And the agency can push back on it.
They can. The agency can controvert the COP itself if they have valid reasons. Like if CA1 wasn't filed within 30 days, or maybe the employee is claiming COP, but there's just no medical evidence saying they're actually unable to work during that time.
Medical, no COP.
Pretty much. In fact, the SOP mentions another tight deadline. If you're claiming COP right from the start, you need to provide medical evidence supporting your disability within 10 days of filing the CA1. 10 days. Wow. First 30 days to file, then 10 days for medical if claiming COP. Lots of early deadlines.
It really puts the pressure on getting things moving quickly. So once OWCP has the claim and initial info, what happens?
OWCP reviews it all. That's kind of adjudication. They might decide they need more information, maybe from the employee, maybe from the agency. The SOP suggests case managers should probably check in on the status, maybe 30 to 60 days after submission if they haven't heard back. And the outcome is a letter.
Yes, a decision letter from OWCP. It'll either be an acceptance listing the specific medical conditions OWCP agrees are work-related for this claim.
Or a denial.
Or a denial, which will explain the reasons why and tell the employee about their rights to appeal that decision. The case manager gets this letter, talks it over with the employee, and helps figure out next steps, whether that's gathering more evidence or starting an appeal.
Okay, so wrapping up this initial filing piece, the absolute must-knows are:
file that CA1 within 30 days for COP. Be accurate and detailed on the form. Attach initial supporting documents if you have them. Know the difference between a CA1, traumatic, and a CA2, occupational. Understand the agency review process. And be ready for those quick deadlines for medical evidence if you need COP.
And keep copies.
Always, always keep copies of everything you submit.
Makes sense. Getting that foundation right seems crucial. But like you said, an injury claim isn't usually just one form and done. It keeps going.
Exactly. Filing is just the start. There's ongoing documentation needed throughout the life of many claims. And the SOP is clear. Once you have that OWCP case number, ECOMP, specifically the document upload feature in ECOMP, becomes your main highway for getting everything else into that case file.
So ECOMP isn't just for the initial filing. You keep using it.
Absolutely. For pretty much everything you need to send to OWCP after the claim is established. To upload, you'll need the claimant's last name, that 9-digit OWCP case number, the date of injury, and their date of birth. The SOP notes that stuff uploaded this way usually shows up in the OWCP electronic file within hours.
Hours? That's way faster than mailing it.
Huge advantage. Mail or fax can take days or even weeks to get scanned in. ECOMP upload is near real time.
Okay, speed is good. Let's walk through some key forms you might need after that initial claim is filed. What does the SOP highlight?
Well, first, if you did happen to use a paper CA1 or CA2 initially, uploading a copy of that into the electronic file is a good first step once you have the case number.
Okay, Digitize the paper start. What if an old injury flares up? You mentioned that earlier.
Right, that's Form CA2A. It's called the Notice of Recurrence. You use this if symptoms or disability come back from an injury that OWCP already accepted in the past. You file the CA2A under the original case number.
Okay, same case number for a recurrence.
Yes. It notifies OWCP that the old condition is active again. Currently, it's a PDF form you fill out and then upload via ECOMP. And you absolutely need new medical evidence connecting this current flare-up back to that original work injury.
CA2A for recurrences needs medical proof. Got it. What about the doctor's ongoing role in paperwork?
Vital. There are several key forms involving the treating physician. One is the OWCP-5, the work capacity evaluation.
Work capacity. Sounds like it's about returning to work.
It is. The doctor uses this form to detail the employee's ability to work what they can and can't do, any physical limitations or restrictions. OWCP, or sometimes the agency, will specifically ask for this form. The case manager usually helps coordinate getting it completed by the doctor and then uploads it. It's really important for planning a return to work or documenting permanent limitations, and you need updated ones if the restrictions change over time.
OWCP-5 for the detailed work abilities. Is there another big one from the doctor?
Yes, and the SOP really flags this one. Form CA17, the duty status report. This one is critical.
Why so critical?
It's got two parts. Section A is filled out by the supervisor, describing the employee's actual job duties. Section B is for the physician, where they list the specific medical limitations and state whether the employee can return to work, and if so, in what capacity, full duty, modified duty, etc.
Ah, so it directly links the medical limits to the job tasks.
Exactly. It's the main tool for figuring out if light duty or a modified job is possible. The SOP highly recommends giving this form to the employee to take to their doctor right after the very first visit and getting it back ASAP. The case manager then gets that completed form and uploads it to OWCP.
CA17, right after the first visit. Crucial for light duty.
Super crucial. And you need to keep getting updated CA17s or at least similar medical reports detailing work status after follow-up appointments if the employee isn't back to full duty yet. Keeps the file current.
Okay, CA17 for work status updates. Now, what about actually getting paid compensation if you're losing wages?
That brings us to Form CA7, the claim for compensation. This is the form you use to claim wage loss compensation directly from OWCP.
Okay, when do you start filing CA7s?
Generally, you'd start filing CA7s after your 45 calendar days of COP run out, assuming you're still unable to return to your regular job.
So after day 45 for a CA1 injury.
Right. Or, if COP didn't apply in the first place, like for an occupational disease claim on a CA2, you'd file a CA7 for any wage loss after a brief 3-day waiting period. By the way, that waiting period gets paid back later if your disability lasts more than 14 days.
3-day wait for non-COP cases.
Oh.
Got it. And once your case number is set up?
You can file the CA7 electronically right in ECOMP.
How often do you file it? Is it a one-time thing?
No, definitely not. If you have ongoing wage loss, the SOP says the CA7 typically covers a 2-week pay period. You should submit a new CA7 biweekly, right after each pay period ends, for as long as you're still losing wages due to the injury.
Bi-weekly CA7s, that's a regular rhythm you need to keep up.
Yes, consistency is key for getting timely payments from OWCP. And the CA7 form also has a specific box you can check if you want to claim for leave buyback.
Leave buyback, that's getting your sick or annual leave restored.
Exactly. If you used your own leave hours instead of taking leave without pay, LWOP, while waiting for OWCP comp, or maybe instead of COP, you can ask OWCP to essentially buy back that leave time. They pay you for those hours, and your agency restores the leave to your balance.
Okay. And is there another form that sometimes goes with the CA7?
Yes, Form CA7A, the time analysis form. This one is required if you're claiming for intermittent wage loss, like missing a few hours here and there for appointments, or working partial days, or if you're doing that, leave buyback claim.
Why is it needed then?
Because it provides the detailed breakdown, exactly which dates and how many hours you missed or want to buy back. You submit it along with the CA7, or you can upload it separately. The case manager is supposed to check that the hours claimed on the CA7A match the agency's time and attendance records.
CA7A gives the hour-by-hour detail. Okay. What about authorizing the medical treatment itself? Is there a form for that right at the beginning?
Yes. For traumatic injuries that need immediate medical attention, there's Form CA16. It's the authorization for examination and/or treatment. This is important. It's issued by the employer, specifically by designated authorized agency personnel.
It's not something the employee fills out.
So if I get hurt suddenly at work and need to see a doctor right now?
The SOP says the best practice is for your agency supervisor or coordinator to issue you a CA-16 within 4 hours of you reporting the injury.
4 hours. That's fast.
It's meant for prompt care. If they give you verbal authorization over the phone first, the actual paper form should follow within 48 hours. That CA-16 essentially tells the doctor that the agency authorizes the initial exam and treatment, and it guarantees payment for that care for the first 60 days from the date the form was issued.
60 days of guaranteed payment from the CA-16. What if it's been, say, over a week since the injury happened? Do they still issue one?
The SOP says the agency is not required to issue a CA-16 if more than a week has passed since the injury. It's really intended for that immediate initial treatment phase for traumatic injuries. Occupational diseases don't typically get a CA-16.
Okay, so CA-16 is for urgent initial care for trauma. The case manager gets a copy.
Yes, the case manager needs to confirm it was issued, get a copy for the file, upload it to ECOMP, and make sure the employee gets the original to take to the doctor's office. And there's a section on the CA-16, Block 6, where the doctor writes their initial diagnosis and treatment plan. That completed page needs to be returned to the agency and uploaded too.
Got it. CA-16 is key for that initial authorization. Now, besides the CA-17 duty status report, is there a more formal medical report form?
There is. It's Form CA-20, the attending physician's report. Now, OWCP needs some kind of medical report to support wage loss claims, but the CA-20 provides a standardized format doctors can use.
What does the CA-20 cover that's different?
It goes into more detail on the medical findings, the diagnosis, the treatment plan. But crucially, it asks for the doctor's specific opinion on causal relationship, meaning, is the condition directly related to the work incident or exposure? And it asks for their detailed opinion on the employee's disability and ability to work.
So CA-20 really digs into the medical justification and the link to work.
Exactly. It provides that formal medical rationale OWCP needs, especially for approving ongoing wage loss benefits. It can also be really important later if the employee has a permanent impairment and wants to file for something called a schedule award.
Schedule award. You mentioned that briefly.
Yeah, it's basically compensation for permanent loss of function of certain body parts, like an arm or a leg, based on a specific impairment rating given by the doctor, according to a schedule in the law. The CA-20 often helps provide the needed medical backup for that. The case manager might specifically request a CA-20 if the regular visit notes aren't detailed enough, and they upload it.
Okay, CA-20 for detailed medical, causal relationship, and maybe schedule awards. Beyond these specific forms, what else needs to get into that ECOMP file?
Pretty much everything related to the medical care for the accepted condition. The SOP really hammers this home. Upload all medical documentation.
All of it, like ER reports, specialist notes?
Yep. ER reports, hospital admission discharge summaries, if applicable, notes from every specialist visit, physical therapy progress notes, results from x-rays, MRIs, other diagnostic tests, anything from any provider treating the work injury. The case manager should be collecting these regularly, maybe after each appointment, and uploading them promptly, making sure they're clearly labeled.
Why upload everything if the hospital or doctor is probably billing OWCP directly anyway?
It's about building a complete, easily accessible record for the OWCP claims examiner. When the examiner needs to make a decision about approving ongoing benefits, authorizing a specific treatment request, maybe considering return to work, having all the supporting medical narrative right there in the file makes their job easier and can potentially speed up those decisions. You're not relying solely on the billing submissions.
So it helps OWCP connect the dots and justify decisions.
Exactly. Timely submission of medical evidence is just a constant theme for keeping a claim moving smoothly.
Timeliness. Got it. What about letters and emails? Communication.
Upload it all. Any correspondence from OWCP letters about acceptance, denial, requests for more information, notices about scheduled medical exams, all that needs to go in the file. And just as important, any letters or formal responses you, or the agency, send to OWCP. Every single piece of paper, every PDF, needs to have that 9-digit OWCP case number clearly visible on it.
Case number on everything. Okay, quick recap on ongoing documentation. Keep using ECOMP document upload. Key forms are CA-2A for recurrences, OWCP-5 and CA-17 for medical work status, CA-77A for wage loss, and leave buyback, CA-16 for that initial traumatic injury authorization, CA-20 for formal medical reports. And then add all the other medical notes and all the correspondence.
That's the gist of it. Maintaining that comprehensive, up-to-date digital paper trail via ECOMP is just absolutely critical. The SOP even suggests verifying that OWCP received the uploads, maybe by checking CQS or even calling the examiner, and keeping your own log of what you sent and when.
Keeping your own submission log sounds like good practice. Okay, let's shift gears slightly. What about getting reimbursed for expenses the employee pays out of pocket? Section 3 in the SOP talks about travel and medical expenses.
Right. Injured federal employees generally have the right to be reimbursed for travel expenses that are both reasonable and necessary to get medical treatment for their accepted work injury.
What kind of travel counts as necessary?
Typically, mileage, driving your own car to and from the doctor, clinic, therapy, etc. Also, public transportation fares. Maybe a taxi or ride share if your doctor specifically says you can't drive because of the injury. Things like parking fees and tolls related to those medical trips are usually covered too.
What about long distances, like if you need a specialist far away?
Yeah, if you have to travel a significant distance, the SOP mentions 100 miles round trip as a general guideline for specialized care that's not available closer. Then lodging and maybe a per diem for meals could be covered. But for longer trips like that, you often need to get prior authorization from OWCP before you travel.
Okay, so check first for long trips. Is there a specific form for claiming these travel costs?
Yes, the standard form is OWCP 957. You might see variations like 957A just for mileage or 957B for other expenses, but the 957 is the main one. You can usually find it on the Department of Labor website or your agency should have copies.
How does the employee fill out the OWCP 957?
It's pretty straightforward. You put your claimant information, case number. Then you list each date you traveled for treatment and which doctor or facility you visited that day. For mileage, you need to list your starting point, the destination address, and the round-trip mileage. For other costs, just list the date, what the expense was, parking, toll, bus fare, and the amount. I think you can put up to 3 trips on one form, usually.
Do you need receipts?
Yes, you must attach receipts for any expense other than mileage. So, receipts for parking, tolls, bus tickets, taxi fares, keep those. For mileage, you just need to provide the start and end addresses so they can verify the distance.
Does the doctor have to sign the travel form, like to prove you were actually there?
Interestingly, the SOP notes that for federal employees' comp, FECA claims, the OWCP 957 form itself doesn't usually require the doctor's signature. However, OWCP can still verify that you actually attended those appointments. They can check the medical reports or the bills that the provider submitted for that date. So the best practice is to make sure that for every single trip date you claim on the 957, there's a corresponding medical report from that provider for that same date already uploaded into your OWCP case file.
Ah, all right. So the medical report in the file basically confirms the visit happened. How do you submit the 957 form once it's filled out with receipts?
Again, the easiest and fastest way is ECOMP document upload. There should be a category specifically for medical reimbursement travel claim or something similar. If you can't use ECOMP, you can mail or fax it to the appropriate OWCP district office address. Often there's a central P.O. box in London, Kentucky used for these. But electronic is definitely preferred. And remember,
Case number on every page.
case number on every single page you submit.
How long does it take to get that money back, and can you track it?
It can take a while, sometimes several weeks. The employee can actually check the status online using the OWCP web bill portal. There's usually a section for claimant reimbursements where you can see if your travel claim has been processed and payment issued. Payment usually comes as a check or maybe direct deposit if you've set that up with OWCP for compensation payments.
OWCP web bill portal for tracking. Good tip. What if the employee paid for medical stuff directly, like prescriptions or copays, before the claim was approved?
That's a different form. It's the OWCT 915, the claim for medical reimbursement. You use this if you paid out of pocket for things like prescriptions for the accepted condition, maybe copays, or even the cost of treatment if you paid up front before the provider started billing OWCP. You fill out the 915, attach the receipts showing you paid, and submit it the same way Econ upload is best.
Okay, OWCP 957 for travel, OWCP 915 for out-of-pocket medical costs. Keep records, attach receipts, except for mileage, upload via Ecom with the case number.
That's the process in a nutshell. And remember that reasonableness point travel should generally be the shortest route. Try to consolidate appointments if you can. And get prior authorization if you need to travel over, say, 100 miles round trip for non-emergency care.
Okay, that covers getting reimbursed. Now, let's zoom out a bit. We've talked about forms, deadlines, documentation. But who is managing all this from the agency side? What's their role look like?
Yeah, the SOP dedicates a big chunk to the case manager's role. And it paints a picture of someone who needs to be really proactive, managing the case from beginning to end. It's not just pushing paper. The goal is to help the employee recover and get back to work safely, while also making sure the agency and the employee are following all the rules.
So they're actively involved, not just reacting.
Definitely. The SOP lists a whole range of tasks. It starts right at the beginning with initial triage and claim initiation. That means helping the employee get immediate medical care if needed, then guiding them and the supervisor through filling out those initial reports, the OSHA 301, the CA1, or CA2, ideally getting it submitted via ECOMP the same day or within 24 hours.
That emphasis on speed again.
It's constant. Early filing, early action is crucial. If it's a traumatic injury needing urgent care, the case manager coordinates issuing that CA16 we talked about, making sure authorized staff follow the 4-hour, 48-hour guideline, knowing when it's not required, like after 7 days. They get a copy, upload it.
What about talking to the employee directly at the start?
That's highlighted as incredibly important, employee intake and counseling. The SOP calls this a crucial interview, part of it gathering all the detailed information needed, which is where having an intake template, like the one outlined later, is really helpful. But it's also about explaining the whole workers' comp process to the employee.
Explaining what? Their rights.
Yes, their rights, like the right to choose their treating physician initially, and also their responsibilities, like needing to report changes in work status, attend medical appointments, cooperate with return to work efforts. The case manager should explain how compensation works, what OWCP expects, provide contact info, maybe give them resources like the OWCP CA10 fact sheet, and just answer their questions.
Setting expectations and educating the employee up front sounds like it could prevent a lot of confusion later.
It really can. Building that understanding is key. Then comes claim documentation and case file setup, creating that organized file, whether it's physical or electronic, documenting key dates and events, and using a checklist again, like the one in the SOP, to track that all the necessary documents are being collected and filed. Using some kind of tracking system for deadlines, like when CA7s are due or when updated medical is needed, is also recommended.
Checklist and tracking system. Sounds essential to stay organized with all these moving parts.
Absolutely. The case manager acts as the primary liaison. They're the main point of contact between the employee, the supervisor, the agency's internal folks, and OWCP, or any contractors the agency uses. They handle the submissions via ECOMP, verify OWCP received things, get the OWCP claims examiner's contact information.
Being that central hub of communication.
Exactly. They also need to review and verify everything before it goes to OWCP. Double-checking injury details, dates, supervisor comments, making sure forms are complete. Catching errors or missing info early is much better than having OWCP kick it back later.
Quality control before submission.
Right. They also coordinate medical aspects, maybe helping the employee find a doctor who understands the OWCP system, providing the doctor with billing information, explaining the kind of detailed medical reports OWCP needs. They might assist with scheduling specialist appointments or tests if needed. And if OWCP assigns a field nurse or a vocational rehabilitation counselor to the case manager needs to cooperate fully with them, sharing job duty information, getting updates.
And actively chasing down those medical reports we talked about.
Yes. Obtaining and forwarding medical documents is a core task. They need to be proactive, requesting updated reports after every significant appointment, specifically asking for those CA17s, especially right after the first visit, requesting CA20s or detailed narrative reports when needed to justify ongoing wage loss, getting OWCP5s if OWCP asks for them, collecting all the specialist notes, therapy reports, and uploading everything promptly. They also need to track and get copies of reports from any second opinion or referee exams that OWCP schedules.
So proactively getting medical, not just waiting for it to show up.
That's the ideal, according to the SOP.
Yeah.
They also have to manage COP and leave, advising the employee and supervisor on COP eligibility, only CA1s, carefully tracking those 45 calendar days, and making sure COP is never used for occupational diseases. When COP ends, they need to guide the employee through the COP leave election process, helping them decide whether to use their own accrued leave or go on leave without pay, LWOP, so they can receive wage loss compensation from OWCP. And if the agency controverts COP, they need to communicate that clearly and provide the justification to OWCP.
Managing that transition point after the 45 days.
Yes, and then ensuring CA7s are submitted timely. This needs to be on their calendar. Explaining to the employee when CA7 filing begins, typically day 46, after the first day of disability for a CA1, if they're still off work, or after that 3-day waiting period for a CA2 or other non-COP situation, helping the employee get into that biweekly rhythm of submitting the CA7, assisting with the CA-7A if needed for intermittent time or leave buyback, and ensuring those submissions continue every 2 weeks as long as the disability and wage loss persist.
That biweekly CA7 is a constant task for ongoing claims. What about that leave buyback option again?
They help with leave buyback,
LBD.
counseling the employee that it's an option, but also explaining the strict 1-year deadline they have to request it from the date the leave was used or the claim was accepted. They coordinate with the agency's payroll office to calculate the amount. Payroll uses a form called CA-7B for this, and make sure the employee submits the CA-77A with the LBB box checked. Then they follow up until OWCP processes the payment and the leave is restored.
So they help navigate that whole LBB process too. It sounds complex.
It can be. And throughout all this, they monitor status constantly, watching for OWCP decision letters, understanding if OWCP assigns a field nurse or starts vocational rehab, checking CQS. The SOP recommends periodic reviews of ongoing cases, maybe quarterly, for long-term claims, just to check the current status, see if medical is up to date, assess return-to-work possibilities.
Monitoring so cases don't just drift indefinitely.
Exactly. And a major goal that the SOP really emphasizes for the case manager is facilitating return-to-work, RTW.
Getting people back to work.
Safely, yes. This means actively working with the employee's supervisor and maybe HR to identify potential light duty or modified job assignments that fit within the doctor's documented restrictions, using those CA-17s and OWCP-5s. If a suitable light duty job is found, they coordinate creating a written job offer. This offer needs to be detailed, clearly state it's within the medical restrictions, be signed by the supervisor, and sent to both the employee and to OWCP. They monitor the transition back. And importantly, if the employee declines a medically suitable job offer,
That can cause problems?
it can affect their entitlement to ongoing compensation. So the case manager has to inform OWCP immediately if a suitable offer is refused. Developing a formal agency RTW plan is also considered a best practice.
RTW seems like a huge part of managing the claim effectively and controlling costs.
It really is. Getting employees back productively and safely benefits everyone. The case manager also focuses on education and communication, keeping those lines open with the employee, checking on recovery, answering questions, sending reminders. The supervisor, updates on status, restrictions, light duty options. The OWCP examiner, being responsive, clarifying issues. And internal partners like HR and safety.
Communicating with all the players involved.
Yes. For employees receiving compensation, they track compensation payments to verify they're correct and timely, explain OWCP's payment cycles, usually every 28 days on the periodic roll, and deal with any overpayment issues immediately if they crop up, like if the agency accidentally pays salary for the same period, OWCP paid compensation.
Overpayments sound like a headache to sort out.
They require quick attention. The SOP also briefly touches on handling third-party aspects. If the injury was caused by someone outside the federal government, like in a car accident while on duty,
OWCP wants that third party to pay.
OWCP expects the employee to pursue recovery from that liable third party. The case manager helps with the necessary election forms and coordinates with the agency's legal or solicitor's office regarding OWCP's right to get reimbursed their lien from any settlement.
That's another specialized area.
It is. And finally, the case manager handles claim closure and stabilization. When an employee fully recovers, they help get the final medical report closing the case. If there's a permanent impairment, they assist the employee in filing that schedule award claim we mentioned, which uses a CA7 plus the physician's impairment rating. For employees on long-term disability, they monitor the case status on OWCP's periodic roll and note any agency HR actions, like separation after prolonged LWOP, according to agency policy.
So the case manager truly sees the claim through its entire life cycle.
They really do. And the SOP adds a few more overarching responsibilities. Being vigilant for potential fraud and abuse, like unreported work, misleading information, questionable provider billing, documenting every significant action, conversation, and decision in a case diary or log, performing regular compliance checks against regulations and the SOP itself using that checklist, maybe doing internal audits quarterly, and focusing on continuous improvement of the agency's process.
Compliance checks like auditing their own work.
Exactly. It's a way to ensure quality and catch issues internally. The SOP also explicitly talks about ethical management. This means balancing the employee's legitimate needs and well-being with the responsibility to safeguard government funds, facilitating necessary care and benefits, but ensuring they receive only what they're legally entitled to. It means acknowledging and fixing errors, and reinforcing the rules if an employee or supervisor seems to be trying to bend them.
That ethical balance sounds crucial.
It is. It also includes educating employees about fraud and making sure supervisors understand they cannot retaliate against an employee for filing a legitimate claim. It's a two-way street. Employee honesty, agency fairness, and adherence to the law.
Wow, that's a comprehensive role. It sounds like getting started right with all the necessary information is absolutely key.
It really is. And that leads right into Section 5 of the SOP, which focuses on that initial intake process. It stresses how gathering the right information right at the very beginning is critical for managing the case effectively later on. The SOP strongly suggests using an intake form or template.
A template to make sure nothing gets missed in that first conversation.
Exactly, a structured way to capture all the key facts from both the employee and their supervisor. The SOP breaks down the essential info that template should cover. Starts with basic employee information: name, job title, department, best contact info.
Standard stuff.
Then the really crucial injury details: the exact date and time the injury occurred, or when the occupational illness symptoms first began, and importantly for illness, when did the employee first realize it might be work-related? The specific location where it happened, a detailed description, a narrative of how it happened, what task they were performing, what objects or substances were involved, which specific body parts were affected, the type of claim, traumatic AA1 or occupational CA2, and were there any witnesses? If yes, get their names and contact info, maybe get brief statements if possible.
Getting that detailed who, what, where, when, how down immediately.
Precisely. Next, the claim details themselves. Do they have an OWCP claim number yet? Note if it's still pending. What date was the CA1 or CA2 actually filed? If they filed an ECOMP, what's the confirmation number? Was continuation of pay, he's COP requested, remember only for CA1s?
Yeah.
If yes, what was the COP start date and what's the projected end of that 45-day eligibility window?
Capturing the administrative status right away.
Right. Then, details about the treating physician and medical treatment. Who was the very first doctor or clinic they saw for this injury? Get the name, address, phone number, and the date of that initial treatment. Have they received any treatment since then? Who is their current treating physician? If it's different, any upcoming appointments scheduled.
Okay, tracking the medical side from the start. And the SOP had a specific point about listing all the places they got treatment.
Yes, this is really important for building the complete medical picture. The intake should capture every place the employee received treatment related to this injury: urgent care, ER, hospital stays, specialist offices, physical therapy clinics, diagnostic centers for x-rays or MRIs. And for each place, you need the date they were there, the provider or facility name, and briefly what was done, e.g. ER visit, MRI, orthopedic consult, physical therapy eval.
That level of detail helps ensure you chase down reports from everywhere.
It does. Prevents gaps in the medical history. Then, info about the form CA16 issuance. Was the CA16 issued for that initial traumatic injury care? Yes or no? If yes, what date was it issued? Who issued it, name and title? Which provider was authorized on it? What was the coverage period noted? And crucially, has the completed CA16 form with the doctor's report in Block 6 been returned to the agency yet?
Tracking that specific authorization form.
Yes. Next is work status and accommodations. Is the employee currently working? If so, full duty or light modified duty, or are they completely off work? If off, what was their last day worked? Has a CA17 duty status report been received from the doctor yet? If yes, what's the date on the latest one, and what are the main restrictions listed? Is light duty potentially available in their work unit? Has a formal offer been made? And what's the actual or expected date they might return to work in some capacity?
Connecting the medical limitations directly to their work situation.
Exactly. And finally, some supervisor and agency info. Get the immediate supervisor's name and contact information. Note what actions the supervisor took in ECOMP. Did they complete their part? Did they controvert the claim? Note the name of the agency's main workers' comp coordinator, if applicable. Was the agency safety officer involved in looking into the incident? And was that OSHA 301 form filed?
Pulling in the relevant agency contacts.
Right. And the template often finishes with a section for claim management notes. Initial. This is space for the case manager to jot down the claim's current status, e.g., submitted, waiting for case hashtag, list immediate follow-up actions they need to take, and importantly, document any specific questions or concerns the employee brought up during that intake conversation.
Using a structured template like this seems essential for gathering all the raw data needed to actually manage the case effectively from day one.
It really is. It ensures you don't miss critical pieces of information needed down the road. That info gets documented and ideally entered into whatever tracking system the agency uses.
And once you have that initial info, keeping track of all the subsequent documents feels like the next big challenge.
Absolutely. The SOP makes it crystal clear. Proper documentation is the absolute backbone of managing these OWCP cases. Section 6 of the SOP is basically presented as a checklist of the essential document that really should be in every complete case file.
A checklist to audit the file and make sure the paper trail, or the digital trail now, is complete.
Exactly. It's a tool to verify everything's there. Let's run through what the SOP lists as key items for that checklist. First, the initial claim form, CA1 or CA2, or the ECOMP filing confirmation. First, the initial claim form, the OSHA 301 incident report, if the agency required one. First, the initial claim form, the CA2A notice of recurrence form, if it was a flare-up of an old injury. First, the initial claim form, a copy of the issued CA16 authorization form, plus a return page with the physician's Block 6 report. First, the initial claim form, the latest CA17 duty status report from the doctor. First, the initial claim form, any CA20 attending physician's reports, especially if wage loss is ongoing or schedule award is being considered. First, the initial claim form, any OWCP 5 work capacity evaluations that were requested and received. First, the initial claim form, copies of all the CKANGEL CA7 claim for compensation forms filed for wage loss periods. First, the initial claim form, copies of all the CA7A time analysis forms submitted with those CA7s for intermittent time or leave buyback. First, the initial claim form, a copy of the agency's completed CA7B leave buyback worksheet and calculation, even though payroll sends the original to OWCP. First, the initial claim form, copies of any OWCP 915 medical reimbursement forms filed, with the supporting receipts. First, the initial claim form, copies of any OWCP 915 travel reimbursement forms filed, with the necessary receipts for everything but mileage. First, the initial claim form, any written witness statements or internal agency investigative reports about the incident. First, the initial claim form, the initial medical reports from the very first treatment, ER, urgent care, first doctor visit. First, the initial claim form, all subsequent follow-up medical notes from every specialist, therapist, diagnostic test center visit. First, the initial claim form, any other miscellaneous doctor's notes or work status reports the employee provides. First, the initial claim form, relevant prescription records if needed. First, the initial claim form, copies of all correspondence from OWCP, decision letters, request notices. Chronological order helps here. First, the initial claim form, copies of all significant correspondence sent to OWCP by the agency or employee. First, the initial claim form, a copy of the formal written return to work offer letter for light duty, and ideally, the employee's written response. First, the initial claim form, periodic claim status printouts from CQS or the agency's internal tracking system. First, the initial claim form, any documentation related to third-party claims, if applicable. First, the initial claim form, and maybe another category for things like photos, the employee's position, description, SF50, etc.
That list really drives home the point you need everything related to the claim documented and filed.
It does. The SOP suggests using this checklist periodically, maybe every quarter, for ongoing cases to review the file and make sure all the latest medical reports, CA7s, correspondence, etc. have actually made it in there. It also mentions a practical tip, having blank copies of the most common forms handy in a case management packet.
Having a well-documented file isn't just bureaucratic, is it? It sounds like it's essential for actually supporting the claim and managing it right.
Absolutely. It's vital for ensuring benefits are paid correctly and on time, for supporting treatment requests, for defending the claim if questions arise, and for facilitating return to work. Which leads us nicely into the final major section the SOP covers, doing it right, compliance, and best practices.
Okay, making sure everything is done by the book.
This section is really about the framework for running a sound program. The goal is ensuring compliance with all the OWCP regulations and agency policies. This protects the injured worker's rights, but also protects the agency's interests. It requires a formal plan and a commitment to getting it right.
What are the absolute non-negotiables for compliance, according to the SOP?
Adherence to timeframes and requirements is number one. We keep saying it. But that 30-day deadline for filing the CA1 to preserve COP is paramount. Also, critical is responding to any formal request for information from OWCP within the timeframe they give, which is often 30 days. Missing those deadlines can seriously delay decisions or even lead to benefits being suspended.
Those deadlines really matter.
They do. Managing COT correctly is another huge compliance point. Remember, strictly 45 calendar days only for eligible traumatic injuries, CA1s. Track those days meticulously. Never ever use COP for an occupational disease, CA2. And you absolutely must have medical evidence justifying the disability for all days COP is paid. If not, OWCP can deny reimbursement to the agency for those unsupported days.
Strict rules around COP usage and documentation.
Very strict. Using the standard forms is also mandatory. Always use the official, approved OWCP forms, like the 957 for travel, 915 for medical reimbursement, etc. Don't try to substitute unofficial agency versions.
Use the official DOL forms. Makes sense.
Yes, privacy and confidentiality are massive. Case managers must comply with the Privacy Act and high pay regulations. Medical information is sensitive. It should only be shared with individuals who have a legitimate, work-related need to know. For example, a supervisor usually needs to know the employee's work restrictions, but not necessarily the specific medical diagnosis. Case files must be kept secure, and you generally need written consent from the employee to share their information with any third parties who aren't directly involved in managing the claim process.
Protecting that sensitive health information is critical.
Absolutely. Accurate benefit administration is another cornerstone of compliance. This means preventing overlapping payments. An employee generally cannot receive their full agency salary or use paid leave, like sick or annual, for the same period they are receiving OWCP wage loss compensation payments. The big exception being that initial 45-day COP period for traumatic injuries. Case managers need to monitor agency time records against OWCP payment notifications to catch and prevent overpayments. And if an overpayment does happen, they need to work quickly with the employee and OWCP to get it resolved.
Preventing and fixing overpayments is key for financial integrity.
It is. Related to that is the requirement to report changes immediately to OWCP. If an employee returns to work in any capacity, full duty, light duty, even part-time, or if their medical condition significantly changes, or if they have a recurrence, which requires a CA2A, the agency must inform OWCP right away. A phone call followed by an uploaded letter is awesome best practice. This prompt reporting is essential to prevent overpayments and keep the claim file accurate.
Timely reporting of any status change is a must-do.
Yes. And finally, under the core adherence rules, continuous medical justification. OWCP benefits are always contingent on having current, supporting medical evidence. We talked about the initial evidence needed within 10 calendar days of filing the CA1 to support COP. For ongoing compensation benefits, regular medical reports documenting continued disability are required. The SOP strongly advises case managers to have a system in place to proactively request these updated medical reports from the doctor, rather than just waiting for OWCP to ask for them.
Staying ahead of the curve on medical documentation.
Being proactive is really stressed as a best practice for compliance and efficiency. The SOP then shifts to broader agency best practices and oversight. This includes things like developing clear internal protocols based on the SOP itself, making sure the SOP isn't just a document sitting on a shelf, but actually guides how supervisors and employees handle injuries and claims.
So the SOP should drive internal training and procedures.
It's exactly. Training and certification for staff who handle workers' comp cases is highly recommended. The SOP mentions Department of Labor courses, regular refreshers, workshops on policy updates. Quality control and audits are also highlighted as a best practice. Agencies should periodically audit their own case files, the SOP suggests, maybe quarterly using that checklist approach. Are the medicals current? Are CA7s filed timely? Are RTW efforts documented? Is copy being tracked accurately? Are long-term cases being monitored? Catching errors or omissions internally is far better than having OWCP find them.
Internal audits sound crucial for maintaining consistency and compliance.
They really are. Utilizing technology effectively is another best practice, leveraging ECOMP, CQS Connect, the web build portal, and any agency-specific tracking systems. These tools help with reminders, reporting, status tracking, and overall transparency, maintaining clear communication and documentation of absolutely everything, and knowing when to escalate issues within the agency if compliance isn't happening, for example. If an employee refuses to attend a required medical exam, or a supervisor refuses to provide available light-duty work.
Document everything, use the tech, and escalate problems when needed.
Precisely. Close coordination with payroll and finance departments is also critical. Ensuring pay is coded correctly, COP versus LWOP versus regular duty, processing agency reimbursements from OWCP correctly, confirming when LWOP starts, so OWCP compensation can begin without gaps or overlaps. It prevents a lot of errors.
That partnership with payroll sounds key.
Yes. And again, a major best practice for both compliance and cost effectiveness is having a strong return-to-work focus. The statistics show the longer an employee is off work, the harder it is for them to ever return. Actively identifying and facilitating safe RTW opportunities is a core goal of a well-run program. Formal agency RTW programs that align safety, HR, supervisors, and employees can be very beneficial.
Bring your people back safely is a win for everyone involved.
It truly is. The SOP also suggests agencies monitor their chargeback costs. OWCP charges agencies back for the costs of their employees' claims. Reviewing these quarterly chargeback reports helps identify trends, pinpoint high-cost cases needing more active management, and ensure the agency recognizes all the claims being charged to them.
Understanding the financial impact helps focus management efforts.
Yes, continuous improvement is also listed. Case managers and program managers should stay informed about OWCP policy changes, ECOMP bulletins, training sessions, update the agency's internal SOP as needed, and even solicit feedback from employees and supervisors on how the process is working. And finally, the SOP circles back to ethical management and fraud prevention.
That balance again between helping the employee and protecting the agency taxpayer.
Exactly. It requires integrity. Facilitating necessary care and benefits promptly, but also ensuring the payments are made only when the employee is genuinely entitled under the law. It means acknowledging and fixing mistakes when they happen. It means gently but firmly reinforcing the rules if an employee or even a supervisor tries to bypass procedures. It includes educating employees on the serious consequences of fraud and also ensuring supervisors understand they must not retaliate against employees for filing legitimate claims. Compliance cuts both ways.
So following this SOP isn't just about checking boxes, it's about building a program with integrity.
That's the goal. It ensures a reputable program that reduces legal and financial risks, manages costs effectively, and, most importantly, provides the proper support for injured federal workers when they truly need it. The SOP should be seen as a living guide, used often and refined as needed.
So wrapping this all up, what's the big takeaway for you, our listener, from this deep dive into the SOP?
I think it's that navigating or managing federal workers' compensation is undeniably detailed. It requires real diligence. But by understanding the steps laid out in this SOP, the process, the key forms, those critical deadlines, the different roles, you get a much clearer roadmap. It equips you, whether you're the employee trying to get through your claim or the case manager trying to handle it correctly and proactively for your agency.
It provides that structure. This detailed SOP clearly lays out all the steps necessary for managing an individual case, aiming to facilitate recovery and return to work. But that brings up a final thought for you to consider. What are the broader, maybe systemic implications? How does the way these individual cases are managed successfully or perhaps unsuccessfully impact an entire agency's overall health, its safety culture, and maybe even the morale and trust of its whole workforce?
That's a really important question, something to definitely think about beyond the procedures themselves.
Indeed. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.